My friend, it is a real pleasure to meet you and to have you on the show today. So thank you very much for being here. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm very appreciative of the chance to change seats in the podcasting world.
Yeah.
We might talk about that today, but I host a podcast too, so I'm usually in the role of interviewer. So it's cool to, swap that dynamic. And I was thinking just before getting on this, like my perfect day. Started the day with a good workout, got a little bit of family time in, tended to the animals, and now get to have a cool conversation. Like that's my perfect day in a nutshell, dude. So thank you for hosting this and having me on.
That's a true blessing when you can recognize a perfect day as well. And off of that, I'm curious, do you feel more pressure hosting or coming on as a guest, if you do feel pressure at all?
That's a good question. I haven't guested that much on podcasts, but alls I do and what led into me starting the podcast was coaching. So professionally, I've been having conversations with people for 6 or 7 years. So it kind of feels like second nature. I will say when I started the podcast, there was a little bit of pressure because I just, you want it to do good. You don't want to fluff your words. You don't want to say too many fillers. You don't want to make mistakes. And I had to do a lot of solo casts in the beginning because I didn't have that much access to guests. So sometimes it was me looking into the camera like this and talking for 30 minutes without trying to miss a beat. And those definitely came with pressure. But for the most part now, I have a bunch of one-liners which we'll share a few of today. But I like to be funny and playful and crude and sometimes, and just have a laugh sometimes. So I always say, just relax your butthole. It's not that serious. You're just having a conversation with someone, take a breath and have some fun. Like this is fun for me. So there's no real pressure anymore. And I haven't felt that with a guest, even sitting across some of my like big list guests or people I idolized growing up. Like GSP was one of the big ones for me because I'm an MMA guy and he was just the hero. He was my hero growing up. And I sat across from him. And the coolest thing wasn't the conversation. The coolest thing was that I was very calm and I was like, I'm supposed to be here. This is awesome. And I just had fun and it was flow. So I don't really feel much pressure anymore when it comes to conversations, man. I just love it. It's all I want to do is talk
Mm,
to cool people, share ideas, challenge ideas, have a bit of banter along the way, figure out how people think, what they think, why I think what I think, use this as a mirror for me and for you, and hopefully the listeners along the way get a few nuggets.
that's beautiful. I really like how you said you had a perfect day. And I like when I know what a perfect day is for me. I think a lot of people kind of live on maybe autopilot and they do these morning routines that they didn't create, they're kind of created for them.
Right.
And I also had a perfect day. I got a workout in, I meditated, I visualized how I wanted this to go, and I feel fantastic. So have you worked on this over time, this kind of this ideal way to go into your day and what works for you, and how do you keep accountable for yourself for that?
Yeah, I've been archetyping this for a long time because I'm a big believer that you want to try and live life by design, not by default. And I think many of us live by default, which is to be ran by our programming, our fears, what culture expects of us, what our parents expected of us, like you name it. There's a bunch of stuff that gets put on us. And I think that sometimes robs us of the beauty of really just sinking into what kind of life do I want to live? What kind of day do I want to have in front of me? How do I want to start it? How do I want to end it? How do I want to fill it? What kind of things do
Mm,
I want to see on my calendar? How do I want to feel? What's the body that I want to be in as I experience these things? What's the state of mind? Where am I? Like so everything along my path has been intentional but with this element of surrender also. My wife and I were talking just a couple of weeks ago as we're, sitting having dinner and the kids are going crazy and we're just laughing at like how do we even end up here? Because in many ways it's that balance of high intention with a lot of just trust and saying yes to the grand adventure of life, because
mm,
it feels a lot of time in retrospect that it was just one big, yeah, that sounds fun, let's do that, on to the next thing. But in every single scenario, whether that was running a bed and breakfast, which we had no business doing, we'd never done that, or traveling to a different country, or moving to Florida during the pandemic with zero money in savings and going online full time with coaching and just being like, yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Now it requires some courage and it requires maybe a little being sure in yourself, totally and honestly, but also with that element of this is directionally correct towards the kind of life that I want to live, intentional
mm.
wise. Like that, this sounds like it would be fun, purposeful, meaningful and fulfilling for me and my wife and now my family. And that's kind of what landed us here in rural Tennessee on 15 acres of land with, children, pigs, goats, chickens. And it's kind of crazy because if you'd have asked me that, when I was growing up as a teenager in England, that you'd be in rural Tennessee, homesteading, podcasting, coaching, I would have been like, what are you smoking? And can I have some of it? Because where's that coming from? Yet here we are by saying yes to the adventure of life and then being intentional and doing the work that's required to make these things a reality that, the rest is unfolding history, as they say.
Mm. I wanted to ask you a question about the definition of success. I think this word gets thrown around a little bit easy these days where, oh, this guy is a massive success. He built this company, he did this. But when you really broke down this guy, he was a shitty father, a shitty husband, and there was other areas of his life that wasn't going well. So I'm curious, how do you define success?
One definition of success is how you feel when you're alone with yourself. I would say when all the noise is dropped, when all the accolades, when you're not trying to prove yourself to anyone or anything, what's the quality of your mind? The texture of your inner landscapes, the regulation of your nervous system, your amount of presence that you can experience. Are you rich in the currency of life and happiness and meaning? Not just rich as culture sells it to us, which is, whoa, multi six figure or seven figure business. That's wonderful if that's your game. Great. But again, I've also worked with these people who earn an extraordinary amount of money, but they might be broken, or they're lacking that presence, or they've gone through 3 divorces, or the kids no longer speak to them. So culturally, they're celebrated as successful individuals. When you get past the facade and you ask that person, how you doing today? And they're barely clinging on for dear life with millions in the bank. Is that really successful? So that's one of the things that traveling really taught me. That was one of the big red pill moments for me that broke my brain in terms of how the world works, is because I always had more of a materialistic view of success growing up. I thought success was a bigger salary, a better job, some kind of title that felt good, nice watches, jewelry, things, just like, and you can never get enough of something that almost works. So when you buy things, you want the next bigger thing, the shinier thing. And then when I went to backpack through Southeast Asia, I saw very happy people who didn't have the things, the material things. They didn't have iPads or iWatches or even TVs in many instances. They didn't have a pot to piss in, is the British term that we used to say, meaning they were dirt poor. Yet
Yeah.
they were rich. They were rich in the currency of something else. And that made me really, really curious
Mm.
because I was like, wait a minute, everything that I thought was leading to success, these people don't have. And I'm looking around and they seem happier and they seem healthier and they seem more welcoming and friendlier. And that for me was just like, huh. That was the first time I'd realized that, whatever term you want to use, like breaking free of the matrix or shattering a belief system or having something like an initiation, which is where everything you believe to be true yesterday is no longer true today. That was a really big one for me because it just made me question everything. And then since then, I've not really stopped asking questions, which, as you know, will help you grow and get you in trouble sometimes as well. But that's why success is an interesting one to define, because there are objective metrics, but there are these very subjective metrics on how one defines success also. And I think the modern human has done a very good job of trading their subjective levels of success, these hidden metrics, for the obvious ones. So a guy or a gal will obviously jump on a salary that doubles their income, which is a very observable metric. But subjectively, the experience of getting twice as much money might come with half as much happiness because they had to relocate to a new city and they hate the job and they hate the boss and they're working 60 hours a week. And the relationship fails because of it, because now they're putting all the energy in this value bucket.
Yeah.
But
But I,
they're twice as wealthy, more
yeah.
success according to culture, right? So it's a very interesting one. I like to take a holistic frame of everything: life, business, health, relationships. So that's why success is quite personal for a person, and there are buckets you can put it in, and finances is certainly one of them. But I think globally speaking, yeah, our modern Western culture looks at success as a very clearly defined thing, which is basically more wealth creation, more things, fancier cars, status games, basically. And I'm not convinced that status games are the way to success.
Mm. I can really relate with that. And I had a similar experience in Southeast Asia. I was 22, backpack in Southeast Asia, and I came across this woman on the beach just cooking pad thai with her
Hmm.
two kids. And I had gone back to this woman like 4 days in a row, and every day her smile got bigger. And every day she was so happy to see me because I was a returning customer, and she was happy that I was there in Thailand exploring her country. And I frame her as the happiest woman I've ever met. And she
Yeah.
was probably making $12 a day.
Yeah.
Who knows? And I think of her. Her name was Lynn. I think of Lynn very often.
Yeah. I have similar memories like that traveling. I remember one time in Chiang Mai in Thailand. I actually got quite sick. It was a pretty gnarly story, and I got a liver parasite from eating some old street food. And we were holding up at like a homestay. So it wasn't a hotel, it wasn't a backpacker hostel. We were living with a family basically. And they were just the sweetest people, and they looked after me and while I was sick, and they were giving me all these Eastern remedies and tinctures and things like that. And thankfully I mended myself with a doctor put a giant needle in my butt and gave me some antibiotics, and I was like, oh, this is going to cost a fortune. I'm on a backpacker budget. He was like, here you go. It was like $11. Sent me on my way
Wow.
on my scooter. I was tripping balls driving down the street in Chiang Mai. Like, I'm not sure what this guy gave me, but 24 hours later I was back, man. But the people, yeah, the energy of the people and that warmth that you're describing, that like level of richness that you can feel despite maybe making, yeah, $20 a day, $15 a day. And here you are, Mr. Gringo, looking at your check-ins account and trying to budget and being all like, when am I going to get back and how much am I going to have to earn and da da da. And you're just like, just it's not as big of a deal as we think it is. And of course, maybe that's a statement of privilege. It's first world problems, all of that stuff. But I think it's good for people to hear and reflect on, because the worst mistake I think a person might make in life is to spend their entire life climbing up a mountain to get to the top of it to realize they've climbed the wrong mountain altogether. That the other mountain was over there. And now they're either going to have one of two things happen. They're either going to experience the sunk cost fallacy, which is, well, that sucks. I've realized I had to get to the top of it to realize this wasn't the one, but I've spent 30 years climbing it, so I'm just going to stay here now and kind of be miserable. Or I've got to
Mm.
reconcile that I got to get my ass down that mountain, travel 15 kilometers across the land, and go and start up another one. Oh, that feels so exhausting. But I do know that that's the mountain that I should have climbed the first time. So I think there's all this reflection, deep reflection of knowing yourself that you have to ask, what do you really want? It's amazing how many people I ask that question to, and they don't have a very clear, defined answer because they don't have something like a personal life philosophy. What they think they want has been given to them. And I
Mm.
say, success is getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you get. So many people get successful, but they're not happy because what they get in the process is not going to make them fulfilled and happy. So they've
Mm.
spent their whole life climbing the wrong mountain. And I think that's something that ideally, we want to recognize sooner rather than later, because you don't want to be the 40-year-old, the 50-year-old having that reconciliation. It would be great if we could all have it. Man, wouldn't it be great if our education systems actually taught us a little bit more of how to ask those questions so that we can literally set off as we enter into adulthood, pursuing the right mountain, pursuing our personal legend, instead of having to fumble forward and realize and hopefully have an experience wherever it is along the line that what we really want is actually this, and we can pivot before life gets a hold of us too much, before we're stuck in the golden handcuffs or trapped by the 401k, or even in a relationship that's not fully aligned because it's the zone of comfortable complacency. And
Yeah.
that is the hardest place to break from, man. You'd almost be better off if your situation was worse. Because if
Mm.
it was worse, you would have the activation energy to do something about it and change it. If it's just comfortably numb, you just stay stuck. People stay stuck there for decades. They waste their whole life there with this ambient sense of something's not quite right. And then they try
Mm.
and fill that with partying on the weekends or chronic addictions or gambling because they're trying to look for something that feels like an adventure when the adventure is actually out there. It's not the life you're living. You're living a shadow life, and you need to reflect on that because you only get one of these in this body at least.
To use the mountain as an example, let's say someone listening right now is climbing this mountain and they're like, hey, as Steve's talking, maybe I'm on the wrong mountain. And this mountain could be a relationship with they're with, or a job, or a life path. How do you take a step back and realize that you are on the wrong mountain, maybe, or even start asking these questions? Is it through self-reflection questions? Is it through perspective? What is some ways that someone can identify the mountain that they're on?
If it's not a fuck yeah, it's a hell no.
Mm,
That's a good place to start. Is the mountain that you're climbing on a fuck yeah mountain? Because if it's not, you might want to do some reflecting on that. And that doesn't mean to say that your mountain might be a big fuck yeah, but the particular little ridge that you're climbing right now feels like a hell no because it's hard. Because to accomplish great things is not always easy. But if we're using the mountain analogy, well, let's imagine we're the eagle flying above the mountain from a high perspective, 1,000 feet above, looking down. Try and zoom out of all the murky subjectivity right now and zoom up to eagle energy and look down and say, am I on the right path? When I eventually get to the top of this thing, am I going to be proud? Am I doing this for me or am I doing it for them? Am I
mm,
living out of fear and scarcity or am I living the adventure? I always say, do you want peaceful slavery or do you want dangerous freedom? I'm the kind of person that wants dangerous freedom. Every day of the week, man, give me dangerous freedom. Some people want the slavery. Some people want the handcuffs. I don't think that's what they really, really want deep down in their soul, because I don't think it's why they came here. But I think there's such an amount of heavy conditioning and fear and
mhm,
self-limiting beliefs that they convince themselves that that's what they want. And they might just be happy. They're like, you know what? Maybe I don't have a fuck yeah life, but I'm content. I'm happy enough. This is good enough. If that's you, dope. Run it out. I have the
mm.
kind of I have an ambient sense that the kind of person that listens to a show like this and is relatively into self-development, let's say, is not after that. They're not after like meh. They want a fuck yeah life. They want a
Mm.
life full of dangerous freedom. Like I don't know where I'm going, but I know exactly how to get there. And it's through stumbling forward into the adventure, the hard right thing, not the path of least resistance, often the path of most resistance. Yeah, because the path of least resistance, in a way, even if you're on the climb, is to keep climbing the mountain because you're like, I'm already on it. The Sherpas went before me. I just got to follow everybody else's tracks. The path of the most resistance, the hard right thing, is to be like, oh yeah, shit. I'm not even at base camp yet. And I know when I get there, I'm not going to feel fulfilled. So do yourself a favor and get your ass down the mountain. And it might mean risk, right? It might mean risk of a loss of income for a certain amount of time, or the loss of a person, the loss of your identity, the loss of your ego, the loss of other people's approval. So there's a
Mm.
lot of loss in going for your win. But what do you weigh more? The potential loss or the grand goal of getting the treasure, like the big dub? Because I think that's what most people want.
100%. And when you are, let's say someone is gonna like, okay, I'm gonna go all in on what I want. I'm gonna go all in on this vision, and then they do it, and then the first month they start getting kicked in the nuts, and they lose their income. They start feeling the pain of a breakup. I know you've been married for a really long time, but I'm sure you've gone through some heartbreak in your life, and it's very painful, and it puts you in a very vulnerable state. So when we're in that vulnerable state, like how do we keep going forward? And
Yeah.
how do we not fall back to the mountain that's not that exciting?
Well, there's a great quote from Viktor Frankl, I think it is, that a person with a strong enough why can endure any how.
Yeah.
So why do you really want this? Because if you're really going for your win, and every fiber of your being wants it, then when life presents you the challenges to ask you, are you worthy of receiving it? You better be able to say yes, regardless of how hard it punched you in the nuts or slapped you around the head. Because this is what hard is supposed to feel like. And if it was easy, everybody would have it. The reason most people don't have it is because when they get to this point where they say, wow, this is really hard, they go back down the hill. They retreat. Like, actually, you know what? It was cool to try, but I'm going to go back to the salary job that was nice and safe. Or you can push through, because I fundamentally think that life is like a giant school that we've come to learn our lessons, to evolve through, to kind of take our homework and to continue to learn and grow through. And that life is constantly presenting you with people, situations, and circumstances to show you where you're not yet free. And many of these appear as challenges. We might call them problems. But a simple reframe sometimes is enough to get somebody to take a step back, to take that perspective again and say, what if the problem is the platform to launch from? What if, as the Stoics said, the obstacle is actually the way? What if all of these, what if the only problem in life is thinking that you shouldn't have any problems? That sounds
Mm,
like a pretty big problem to me, is that you expected the coming to the truth of who you are and accomplishing everything that you wanted was going to be easy.
mm.
Because it's not going to be easy. Are you the kind of person that quits when it gets hard is the real question. The problems and all of these challenges that arise from this is kind of the cost of doing business. It's the cost of going for your win. It's life is your sparring partner, and you're either going to let it kick the shit out of you, or you're going to learn. Man, it keeps catching me with that right hook. I've got to learn to duck and roll. I've got to learn to slip. I've got to learn to like be a bit more patient. I've got to learn when to attack. So, like, look at life as just this giant school that's offering you all of these lessons, and instead of saying, "Oh, poor me," like, why is this happening to me? The reframe is always, "What's this trying to teach me? Life is
Mm.
happening for me. Yes, this is hard. Of course, it's hard." Because very few people you speak to are living their dream life. Therefore, if it was easy, more people would be living that, right? So it's the cost of entry, and you just have to keep going, because if you don't keep going, you're never going to win. And if that's what we want, then we got to find some way to dig deep, some way to to get beyond that how when the how gets tough.
Quick, like personal testimony on this. The other day, like the past, I'd say year and a half for me has been a combination of like the hardest period of my life so far. It's been very challenging, and on the exterior, everything looks great. I'm living in South America. I'm learning Spanish. Things look like they're going great, but internally, I've been dealing with a lot. And the other day, quick vulnerable story. I was walking down the road, and I sometimes will record a video of myself when I'm like, just need to let some stuff out, and kind of just for me. And sitting here talking about like I just don't get it. Like things have been so hard and it keeps getting harder and harder. And I wanted to fill it with vices. Like I wanted to just go get a beer, man. Just go get a glass of wine. Like it'll help you calm down. And this particular day, it was a really challenging day for me. And then I thought while I was talking on the video, I was like, what if at the bottom of the ocean and I'm swimming up to get air. And I'm finally at the top of the ocean and there's this layer of ice. And the reason why it's so hard right now is because I'm at this layer of ice. And I just need to break through that layer of ice and I will get the air. But what I feel like maybe I've done in the past and what other people have done is they'll do things to swim back down once they get to the ice because it gets so difficult at the ice. So I'll go and drink my thoughts away or something
Right.
or whatever vice you have, and you swim back down, and then that ice is going to come back. So I'm just curious, kind of what your thoughts are on that analogy.
Well, it's a great analogy, but it points to a fundamental operating system of the way brains and humans at large work. So here's something we've got to understand. Your brain does not care about you thriving. It only wants you surviving. So it sees any potential change, because change means new, and new means potentially dangerous, as a giant threat. And this is why people would often stay in a familiar hell than embrace the possibility of a new heaven, because it
Mm,
fundamentally requires change. So Stephen Pressfield calls this the force of resistance. And he says resistance is as real as gravity. It's a universal force. And resistance might be described as this tension that you feel between who you could be if you were all that you could be, and who you are when the lower self wins, when the ego wins, when the fear wins. So the analogy that I use when I talk about this, and I love your, breaking through the ice analogy, and it's very similar. I talk about being on the edge of a diving board. Because as you're climbing up the ladders, you might be feeling a little bit of butterfly nerves, but it's, you're just climbing up the ladders. And then you stand on the very edge of the diving board and it's not too real, but you start to creep forward where you're going to get to the point where you actually have to jump. And in that moment before the jump, you're like, oh shit. And in that moment, you feel every iteration of the lower self that is trying to talk you out of the jump. And that's more of a physical feeling in a sense and a threat of danger, right? Because it's like, well, what if we get hurt, etc. But it's very similar to what happens psychologically as we're trying to take the jump. And here's what's interesting. We don't call it a leap of guarantee. We don't call it a leap of security. We call it a leap of faith. There has to be something in you that transcends the lower self, that says, feel the resistance and do it anyway. And that's what courage is. In the manosphere, in the self-help sphere, there's too many people that proclaim to have no fear. What a crock of shit that is. If you're doing anything big, it's going to be scary. But courage is feeling the fear and doing it anyway. It's getting your ass to the edge of the diving board where your tippy toes are literally in the precipice. And every part of you says, no, 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 retreat. Go back to the old behaviors. Take the edge off. Have a drink. Go smoke a ciggy. Eat some fast food. And you say, shut up, bitch. And you jump.
Yeah.
And like I said, like Rumi has the beautiful line. He says, leap, and then the net shall appear.
Mm.
He doesn't say leap because there's a safety net waiting to catch you and it's all going to be good. You got to leap first and trust the courage that it required you to take the leap is the same courage and energy that will be there to support you in the next right thing that comes after the leap. Because that's not the end. That's just the beginning of a new life, so to speak. So this tug of war, as I describe it, is like a constant push and pull between your higher self and your lower self. Who you are and who you could be. Fear and love. Scarcity and abundance. And they're constantly toing and froing. And most people have spent the predominant mode and time of their life stuck in lower self energy. They don't even disassociate from that voice of scarcity or condemnation or judging because they think they are that voice. There is no separation. But there is an ambient sense always of this, what I would call the higher self, or the soul, or the daemon, or whatever else you want to call it, your potential, that is kind of like subtly knocking at the door and whispering and calling you into being more. But you're only going to follow that if you can find the courage, if you can push through the ice, or if you can jump and take the leap of faith, because it's not safe. Again, your brain is a prediction and protection machine. It's trying to protect you from heartbreak. It's trying to protect you from feeling something that you felt in the past by attempting to predict the future. But the brain can't predict the future, so it uses models of the past. And therefore, in a sense, you give the past the power to define your future, and you relive similar patterns over and over again. It's only when you realize that you take agency back, that the past does not define the future, that you did the best that you could with the tools that you had in those moments, and even those ways that you navigated that difficult challenge might not be serving you now, 5 years later, and you need to integrate them and let them go, transcend them, so you can move into something more whole, more integrated, more put together. Then that's how you get yourself to the point where you can push through this level of discomfort, punch through the ice instead of descending back, so the pressure equalizes and you feel safe again. That's how you get there.
Mm. This reminds me of this idea of falling in love, and I believe it was Alan Watts that said you don't rise into love, and it's really an act of faith, and it kind of comes back to what we were talking about in the beginning when I asked you about your definition of success. There's an element of surrender, and I find that just so important. When the lower self is speaking, I even give a name for my lower self. I call them
Mm-hmm.
Jiminy Crickets. I think I might have got that from Matthew McConaughey. Um, but I'll speak out loud to him or whatever it may be, and I'll say, "No, not today, motherfucker. I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm not gonna give into this bullshit. I'm not gonna sit here and scroll on social media, X, Y, and Z."
Yeah.
Do you have any when the lower self speaks to you? And I'm sure it comes up for all of us. Do you have any like things that you do that are unconsciously competent now, or
Well, I think the unconsciously competent piece is a really important conversation here, because with enough reps, there is a world or a possibility where the default mode of operating is from the higher self consciousness, but it takes a long time to get there because you've got to beat. If it's a tug of war, imagine using a gym bro analogy. Your lower self is jacked out of his goddamn mind. So many reps. Jiminy Cricket is in the corner, just like double biflexing like a goddamn savage. And your higher self is like first day at the gym, scrawny, weedy, intimidated. Look at all these testosterone fueled guys. It smells like pheromones and creatine in here. Like, what the fuck is going on? But it's all reps. Life is reps, life is practice. So there is a world where you can take some power back over Jiminy Cricket and you can start to strengthen the higher self. And he can become brolic and he can become who you are. Now, what you said when you actually kind of enter into a dialogue with this is like, no, not today. That's really interesting because what you're doing is in that moment, you're disassociating from it. You're taking away power. You're actually talking to it, which means I'm not talking to me. I'm talking to a part of me, right? And that creates separation because you can't change anything you're not aware of. Now, you
Mm.
can't have that conversation with your lower self if you think that lower self is you because you're unconscious. So the only unconscious competence you've got is to have terrible habits that don't serve you and to check out from life and not surrender to the great mystery and not do the hard right thing. So there's this idea of like name it, contain it, and tame it. So if we can name it, Jiminy Cricket, then we can tame it and figure out, number one, what does it want? Because primarily it's not an enemy. And this is where we've got to be careful with, because I take a similar, like, very hard stance against the lower self, the inner bitch, the coward, etc. But you've got to fundamentally realize that it's not an enemy that needs to be beaten. It's a scared part of you that needs to feel safe enough to change. When we feel safe is when we can surrender to life, when we can run this giant surrender experiment, because that's fundamentally what life is always doing. And you could call this God or source or spirit. It's basically saying, do you trust the plan? And if you can't surrender to the plan, then you stay stuck in the lower self because it doesn't feel safe to give it up to God, to give it up to the mystery. The higher self is totally fine with that because it doesn't operate from this scarcity mindset. It doesn't operate for this need for control and this need for security. It fundamentally trusts the flow of life. It knows that what you seek is seeking you, but only if you're worthy of receiving it. That's why affirmations don't work. That's why you can't just look in the mirror and say, I'm going to be fit, strong, healthy, and wealthy, and then don't actually change any behaviors.
Yeah, and you feel like a
Because,
Toyota Camry.
right, it bounces off your inner bullshit meter. You're like, no, you're not. You're still doing this. You're out of
Hmm.
integrity. And if you're out of integrity, what you are seeking cannot seek you because you're the block to it. So this is the tricky realization that people have to make is that you are simultaneously the cause of and solution to all of your problems. You, me, not the world, not politics, not your heartbreak, not the girl that cheated on you or the guy that cheated on you or the boss that fired you unfairly, just you.
Mm.
There's this really empowering, I think it's an empowering quote that says, power follows the blame finger. So point that at the only person that can make the change. So power follows the blame finger. If I'm saying it's him, her, my genetics, how I was raised, my parents, my traumas, power follows what I blame. And what I encourage people to do is turn that right back around and point it at self. And this isn't to blame self, because sometimes you were dealt a really bad hand. Sometimes things, genuinely bad things, happen to you for no fault of your own. Genuine bad strokes of luck. So that's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And when you point back at self, you're asking yourself to take responsibility for it and what I do now. Because if I don't do that consciously, it's very easy to slip into the victim mindset of saying, well, I am this way because of that. And that's that is the essence of a limiting belief. If I am this way because of that, that's a statement of totality, right? But when I actually point it back at myself and say, this happened to me, how can I do something like alchemy and figure out what I can learn from this or how I can use this instead of just being used by it? And I
Mm.
think that's something that we all need to lean into a little bit more is we hand over our own sovereignty a little bit in micro moments every single day, even down to, I was going to have a good day today and it's raining outside. I was going to get my steps and the weather. What if it's a beautiful rainy day outside. Let's go get wet. These tiny little moments, the person messed up your coffee shop order, to the big things like, but I can't believe it. I was betrayed. Because if we don't actually work with these beliefs on a micro and a macro level, they'll become who we think we are. And that can
Mm.
be very, very dangerous because most of the time, who we think we are and how we think the world operates is fundamentally clouded by the inherent negativity bias that our brain operates from. It sees the scarce side of the world. It sees the fear, it sees the insecurity because it's a prediction and protection machine. So we have to be very, very careful and actively work against that if we are to see something that we want to be more hopeful, more optimistic, more abundant. That's not going to happen to anybody by accident. It's just because you're actually having to fight a little bit of your own programming in order to retrain yourself into that. So with enough reps and with enough time, it's not so much of a tug of war between lower self and higher self. It's predominantly higher self that when confronted with new challenges, that voice comes back again of the lower self. And you're like, ah, there you are, old friend. Where have you been? And, they say new levels, new devils. If you're on a growth journey and you're thinking like this, you are absolutely going to encounter new levels with new devils, and your higher self will
Mm.
get you to the new level. And then the challenge is going to come, and you're going to be asked again from life. You're going to be tested again from life. How badly do you want this? This is
Mm.
just life coming full circle again and saying, here's where you're not yet free. Can you grow through this too?
Mm. It's that level of extreme ownership that I think you're getting to, and with that blame, I really like that. And when you're at this mountain, let's kind of go back to that example, and maybe you're halfway up the mountain, and there's challenges, and you're building that muscle though of having this ownership and taking blame for things. You're understanding it's like, okay,
Mm,
this was my fault. What can I learn from it? How can I keep going? And then when you get to the higher peak of the mountain and the problems are a lot more, you've built up that muscle. I like to use this example with kind of taking blame and ownership, and this kind of can connect to like spiritual law a little bit. But if I eat a bad oyster, it's my fault. What did I do to get this bad oyster put on my plate today? How can I take that level of extreme ownership in my life with things that happen to me? And what am I going to learn from it?
yeah. And I do think there's an important caveat here where there is a level where radical responsibility can go too far.
Mm,
Like extreme ownership can go too far if you don't have the metacognition to be aware that if I just then say, okay, well, it's all my fault. What the subtext of that can be is that I deserve it then. And if I deserve it, it's all my fault. All these bad things happen to me because I deserve it. Then that's a very slippery slope. It's not that you deserve this. It's just that it's what happened. Deserve is a word that we probably should get rid of from our vocabulary because it only gets us in trouble. Because if we believe we deserve bad things to happen to us, they will happen to us. And if we deserve good things should happen to us, and they don't when we feel like self-righteous and that the world's got something against us, you don't really deserve anything. You get the seeds you plant is, the fruit that you'll eat from one day. And the day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit. So I think this language of like deserving something is tricky. And a lot of people operate from that because maybe they've gone through heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak and they're banging their head against the wall. Like, why can't I figure it out? Why can't I
mm,
find Mr. Right or Mrs. Right? And life is presenting you with people and situation and circumstances to show you where you're not yet free. So maybe you're not yet free there because you don't fundamentally believe you are deserving of a happy, healthy, loving relationship. So you attract exactly the kind of person that shows you where you're not yet free. And you go through the honeymoon period, and 3 to 6 months in, it happened again. What's going on? And then that's another like little check mark. It's another penny in the piggy bank that tells you, yeah, see, you don't deserve it. So
mm.
that has been deeply ingrained now as a fundamental belief. I guess I am the person that doesn't deserve a loving relationship. Now, unless you can actually get in there and remove that, you are never going to have the loving relationship that you could have unless you get rid of that. Because life is just a giant mirror. It's just reflecting back to you your inner states. And we are self righteous creatures. We want to be right, even if being right hurts us. So when I have a statement like the world is cruel, all I see is cruelty. If I have a statement that all men are the same, all I see are examples of men being the same, whatever that means.
Mm.
If I have a belief that I'm not worthy of receiving a loving, committed, and loyal relationship, then I won't create one because I'm fundamentally, it's impossible to do so because I'm not in coherence with reality. So this
Appearance.
is this very, very much like this deep reflection of, I would say that the heaviest weight that a person shoulders in life is the weight of the uninvestigated beliefs. Why do you believe what you believe? And is it still true now? And is it healthy? And is it serving you? And is it helpful? Because if it's not, time to do some work.
And with that work, and to ask that question that you just asked, let's use the example of maybe the guy or the girl that keeps attracting the same relationship. And there's this belief that's attached to it. What type of work or questions can they start to do to start to understand, like, okay, I'm the one that's actually attracting this?
Well, it's both a top down and a bottom up approach at the same time. And I'll explain that because most of the fixes that we try and apply in modern culture are top down solutions. So we think we can think our way out of these problems, that we can therapy our way out of these problems by retraining our thoughts. And retraining thoughts is big. Don't get me wrong, shifting perspectives is big. But if you think that you can think your way out of a thinking problem, it's like trying to drink your way out of an alcoholism problem. It's not going to work. It's the same poison that got you in the problem in the first place. And this one won't really turn into a medicine at a microdose. You need a willingness and a perspective that healing is possible, first and foremost. That getting rid of a limiting belief is possible. Because if you believe you can or you can't, you're right. So at a certain point, you have to fundamentally just ask a person, do you believe? Can you suspend belief maybe even for a second and see any kind of scenario where you could be happy, healthy, wealthy in a better relationship? And if they're like, no, then that's really problematic. It's very problematic. And the top down is either going to be blocked unless we can come bottom up at this point. Because what I would say in that situation is where somebody fundamentally doesn't believe it, is they've got a somatically rooted nervous system problem. They have been blocked, and it probably goes back decades, likely to childhood, or likely to a core defining wound. So, kind of spiritually speaking, almost everybody you meet will have lots of little chinks in the armor, death by a thousand paper cuts kind of thing. But almost everybody will have a core wound, like a fundamental wound. Now, Rumi would say that the wound is where the light enters. And it can be the place where the light enters if you're willing to go to that place. But what do most people do with a wound is they patch over it and they try not to pay attention to it. Or when life presents them with these situations to work through it, they keep picking at the scab, wondering why the scab never heals. So what I would suggest for people in that situation is to understand that the issues are in the tissues a lot of the time. This sounded woo-woo a few years ago. It's since been validated and is now one of the best-selling books of all time. Vessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score is every therapist's like best friend right now, which is understanding that things that happen to us that now we think just live in here as a memory are actually stored in the nervous system. And they manifest as energetic blocks. They manifest as patterns. They manifest as trapped emotions. And I've always loved this analogy that emotions are energy in motion if they're moving freely. But if energy is not in motion, then what does it mean? It's stuck. And if emotions get stuck, then they come out sideways. So in men's work, for example, you'd be amazed at how many times I ask a guy, like, when was the last time he had a powerful release? When was the last time he had a good cry, a good, like, sob? And they don't even know. They don't even remember because they're fundamentally blocked from having that emotion. Usually because they're fearful of it, because they've
Mhm.
got all of this baggage that one time they did cry, they were slapped across the back of the head by the dad who said, don't be a girl, only girls cry. Or something that happened to my wife when her mom was in the hospital and they didn't know whether she was going to make it. And my wife was 16 at the time, having a horrendous reconciliation that she might be about to lose her mom. And she was crying, and her dad grabbed her by the shoulders and said, you're a machine. Machines don't cry. And to this day, my wife has a very hard time crying. I wonder why. Because in perhaps the most delicate moment where you want to be met by a
Wow.
compassionate witness, you were told you're a machine and machines don't cry. That's a core wound. So, and my wife's very open to this and doing the healing too, but what would unlock something like that, or the person that doesn't believe that they are worthy of the loving relationship, is because they've got so much stuck, stagnant energy on the nervous system that they need to move that out. And about the best thing that you can do to move stagnant energy is going through the body, the bottom up approach. And that's probably things like breath work. It's probably things like deep breathing into the nervous system, which is really interesting how it works because it's something like reinitiating a almost trauma response, almost like a panic attack response in the body, but whilst being in full control of it from the driver's seat. So this isn't the trauma that life thrust upon you. This is going back by being the controller, by being the person that's actually breathing and holding the intention to bypass that fear and scarcity, to get into the nervous system, to excite or de-excite certain nerves. And this is why all kinds of crazy things happen in breathwork. You might get the tetany, like the claw hands, and then all these emotions start coming up. Wow, I feel rage. Wow, I feel bliss. Wow, I need to cry. Wow, I feel like I'm going to puke. And all of that stuff, when you can bypass the default mode network of the brain, when you can do that in a way where you understand that, like, oh, I'm doing this. I haven't taken a psychedelic. I've not done anything like that. I'm just breathing and I'm getting into the body to heal the body, to release something. Those can be profoundly life changing for people because in a single session or in a handful of sessions, they can fundamentally get whatever was stuck. You can imagine it as some kind of like emotional sludge released and out of the body. And then they don't need to come top down anymore
Mm.
because it's not a thought. It was the stuck emotion that was creating a feedback loop. And all of a sudden, they're like, I feel like that's gone. I feel like there's a lightness in me. I'm open to the possibility that that's not me anymore, that that chapter is closed, that I've finally completed that wound that I kept picking the scab of. And now the top-down system of like, okay, now we've got to have some strategic things like how do you pick the right kind of partner and what boundaries do you need to set and what, habits do you need to look out for. But I think that person that's done a combination of one of those or both of those, ideally both of those, is much more likely to be able to rework a belief because beliefs aren't just mental, they are somatic and
Mm.
they inform each other. The thoughts are the language of the mind and emotions are language of the body, but they're constantly talking to each other and creating anxious scarcity loops. So usually the kind of changes you want to make in the brain, it's sometimes easier to go through the body, to get the body into a because what it fundamentally is doing is getting your body back to a place again where it feels safe, like safe and abundant. And if I feel safe, I see the world through a safe lens. I see people through a safe lens. But if my body inside is doing this, then that's who I see. That's what I attract. And usually people, especially in romantic relationships, they are trying to fix themselves through trying to heal another broken person instead of adopting, I just need to heal myself to the best of my ability and invite somebody in on that journey that's doing the same level of work on themselves.
I'm so grateful for this conversation today, man. You deliver information so well, and it's just beautiful to hear you speak. I really like the how you quoted Rumi, the light is where the wound is. And it kind of reminds me of like how Carl Jung would do like work with the shadow self
Mm-hmm.
and to get familiar with that dark, kind of scary person that we're trying to avoid. Do you think with not doing this work through the body and from the bottom up, a lot of us are just numb and we're not even aware of what is happening and we're trying to do things from the top down because logically we're just that's all that makes sense and we're just numb. But if we start to implement these breath work techniques that you're talking about and other type of work, we can kind of shock that core and stop being numb to what's actually happening on the inside. And maybe we don't even remember. um, I was actually sitting with ayahuasca earlier this year, and I had remembered something that I had no clue my whole life, and it
Yeah.
happened to me when I was like 6 years old. And I was like, this is why I'm afraid of women cheating on me. It's because of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, dude.
And it took some work to sit with that. And I was bawling my eyes out. I'm like, wow, it all makes sense.
Yeah. Like it's in there, it's in there and it didn't find you until 20 something years later. Whoa. What else is in there then? And that's you even being open to that. The average person is like they believe they are just this thing between their ears. Have you ever seen
Mm.
that meme where it's like the guy carrying a sled behind him and it's the heaviest thing you'll ever carry and it's just his head that weighs like 1,000
Yes.
pounds, forgetting the beautiful innate intelligence of the body and all that it can hold. So the image that's often invoked here is like the iceberg. So when you see an iceberg, you only see what's the surface. It's like the tip of the mountain. But if you could drop below the surface for a minute, you would see a giant thing beneath the surface that is so vast. So whatever numbers it is these days, only, 10% is the iceberg that's conscious, so 90% is this unconscious. And that's what Carl Jung would call shadow work or depth psychology. And they communicate to us in very different ways. Like Jung was very famous for investigating dreams and the dream state, because when you're asleep, the veil is very thin between the conscious and the unconscious. And that's why he always would say that pay attention to your dreams. They're little messages from your unconscious. You might be like, what the heck? I was flying a dragon and there was that girl that I knew from thinking, and that guy I'd only just met. You're like, that can't mean anything. But maybe everything means something if you look at
Mm.
it with a curiosity enough. But what you said, you use the word numb. And it's a great word for it, because what we are fundamentally experiencing is a disconnection from ourselves. It's a disconnection. It's a disconnection from what's really alive in here. And it's numb. And it's numbed through so many different ways. Assaults on our attention, hyper and easy, immediate access to dopamine and to food and to artificial lights and to stimulants and you name it. And we become completely disconnected from the body that we live in, and we live between our ears. And if that's only 10% of what we have available to us, and we're divorcing ourselves from the body, which is not just a meat suit, is this incredibly intelligent, sensing, feeling, storing thing that houses the vast majority of our unconscious, that yes, might sometimes be hard to explore, but hard now, easy later, because you're already experiencing it now. You're just doing it in an unconscious, disconnected way. So wouldn't it be better to experience it in a holistic, aware way, to go back in? Joseph Campbell had one of my all-time favorite quotes where he said, "The cave you fear to enter has the treasure you need the most." This is the work we're talking about here. Most people don't want to go back in there because they have this sense that that thing that really hurt me, I don't want to relive. Or God forbid, I find a memory that I didn't even remember that's going to wreck me so badly. But again, because you chose to go there, like you were the willing guy in the analogy of the cave that you fear to enter, you were the guy that pulled out his sword and was like, I'm really scared to go into this cave because there's a big scary dragon at the door. But instead of never going and never trying and never finding my treasure, I'm going to go and slay it. I'm going to go in there. And the hero's journey is encapsulated in that when you get the treasure, you don't just sit on top of it like Schmeagol and say, my precious, and enjoy your riches. You return home. That's the return. So there's the adventure where you leave the ordinary world. Then there's the battle of the innermost cave. And then there's the return home. And the return home is to share those gifts with other people through
Mm.
podcasts, through who you are, through conversations, through permission slips to say, you can do this too. I didn't heal
Mm.
because I'm special. I healed because I did the work that you haven't yet done. And I didn't even know any of this work existed if it wasn't for the wonderful, wacky, and weird world of the internet. And when I heard something, it resonated with something inside of me that said, I want a bit of that too. So then I went and I found these things and I stumbled. And now my whole mission is to just like, hey, you can have this too. I believe every single person can have this. But again, are you willing to go there? And I
Mm.
think it's worthy. I think it can be scary. But again, that's where the treasure is.
With the word numb that we talked about, let's kind of visualize someone that is numb to what's happening and there's this work that needs to be done. Do you think that pride gets in the way of them actually doing that work and working through that of, oh, I'm a man. I don't cry. I'm on earth to suffer because I'm a man. Um,
Yeah, I think they might call it pride, but what it really is fear, you know?
mm,
It's fear. It's fear. It's the scared little boy that is inside of every man, regardless of age, that doesn't want to be seen as being weak. Gabor Mate traced the etymology of the word vulnerability to a wound. So vulnerability is the ability, aka the willingness to be wounded. And that's what we mean when we say vulnerable. It's not an empowered state. It's like I'm a bit sensitive here. To be vulnerable
mm,
is to allow yourself to be witnessed, to allow yourself to be judged. And men in particular do struggle with this. I struggle with this for the first 26 years of my life. I didn't cry. I was a man. I'll figure it out. Just let me watch a YouTube video and suck it up.
Yeah.
And then I was cracked open. And it's like, oh. And you can start to reframe that level of vulnerability that is required to acknowledge that you have fear, but to do what is required, whether that's, healing, crying, etc. When you can actually hold that, that's courage that I was talking about. That's strength. I have this working definition of what does it mean to be a man. And I say that you want to be strong enough that you can be soft. Because most men are posturing as strong when it's actually weakness. So they can never show the soft side because they haven't really integrated that warrior archetype that acknowledges that, yeah, going to battle is really fucking scary and emotional. And in that book I mentioned earlier, The Body Keeps Score, the author had a quote that says, healing occurs in the presence of a compassionate witness. And men struggle with that. They struggle with the compassionate witness. Whether it's cultural baggage that they should just figure it out all alone, or whether it's the fear of being seen. I don't want
You
people
know,
to see me in that state, because it's soft, it's delicate, and that's not what we have been painted to be. We're just supposed to be these rocks, don't feel and be tough.
mm,
But it's not really who we are. So I think a lot of that bravado that you mentioned, that pride is just fear. And I think
mm.
it's okay to have that fear.
Can you elaborate on that quote a little bit? By like the compassionate witness?
Yeah, that healing only occurs in the presence of a compassionate witness. That self-help is bullshit in many ways. That we can only heal so much on our own. That real healing occurs in community because it's who we are. And it ties on from a point we were just making a few minutes ago about this disconnection. Because when we're disconnected from ourselves and we're numb, we cannot be connected to the world if we're disconnected from ourselves. If we're disconnected from ourselves, we can't be connected to a lover. We might have moments and glimpses where we can connect to them, but we're not fundamentally connected to anything if we're disconnected from ourselves. And that's why we need to be witnessed in our healing. And that's why if you ever see it, whether it's a video or I'm knowing that you've sat with ayahuasca and been in spaces, I know you've witnessed healing. And I know that in those states that you might not know exactly what the person is going through when you hear the deep sobs or the tears or even the screams, but you are holding the space of the compassionate witness.
Mm,
You've probably felt like an energetic resonance there to just be like, I'm just sending this person love right now. And
mm.
if we can be in those spaces, oh my God, can profound healing happen. And we can
So
only go
beautiful to
so
be a
far on our own.
compassionate witness as well.
Oh, the
Excuse my
gift,
interruption. So beautiful.
the ultimate gift, man. Like, and that's what men want, by the way. Men
Mm,
want to be that mountain energy that the feminine and the world and other men can come to know they're just going to be met with mountain, compassionate, sturdy, loving, accepting, witnessing.
mm.
Not I'm gonna fix this for you, not suck it up, bro. Just like I'm gonna hold this with you. I'm gonna be here. And the reason it's hard it's hard for men to do this and it's hard for men to find this is because usually if you're having a big emotional experience, it triggers something in me that I'm not comfortable with. So I try to coach you out of it instead of just letting you have the experience. Because if we think of the average man's life, they haven't been around men that have let their emotions be seen, at least in a healthy way, because they've seen emotions come out sideways. They've seen their dad hit the mom, or yell at her and call her a X, Y, and Z, or kick the dog, or punch a hole through the wall, or even hit them. That's emotions. It's not like men don't have emotions. Most men are just acting their emotions out sideways. Now, wouldn't it be better for all of us in society if we could come together in spaces where there was a compassionate witness? And the acknowledgement that this compassionate witness is also a part of you.
Mm,
That pride that you said, I'm not going to do this, come by our shit, sit around the fire and cry and think about feelings. That's not very compassionate, is it? That's not witnessing,
mm.
that's denial. So again, it all runs through you at the end of the day. Just like if you're not connected to yourself, you can't be connected to the world or the people in it, or you're at least a massive reducing valve for that. You're probably not going to find yourself in spaces where you're the compassionate witness if you can't even do that a little bit for yourself. But I think we need to be seeking out these spaces and these kinds of conversations because otherwise we just get lost in the desert. We think we're an island. We're just out there alone. No one's coming to save and no one cares about us. when the truth is much deeper than that when you create and intentionally seek out the spaces to find it, you know?
Mm. I feel like this compassionate witness, there's a part of the compassionate witness, what I've seen that is like, yes, me too. I've been there as well. At my retreats that I do, last one I did in Peru at Machu Picchu, but we had a group sit around and we just shared something that's really, really bothering us. And in that moment, we weren't seeking counsel. So I'm going to share this thing that's really bothering me, but let's not seek counsel at this moment. Let's just all go around and you can see people's heads saying, yeah, me
Hmm.
too. Me too. Wow, I didn't know anybody else was dealing with this. And there's this freedom, shoulders start to drop because they're like, I'm not alone. And it's so beautiful when we can see that. And I believe sometimes a compassionate witness is like, yeah, I've done that too.
Yeah.
And I'm here for you because I've gotten through that, or maybe I'm going through that too.
Yeah. It might be the core wound of humanity, maybe. We spoke about how everybody has a core wound. Like the core wound of humans in general is that we've bought into the illusion of separateness. That I think just because I experience this and you experience that, and 8 billion souls over there experience their unique manifestation of the world, that we're completely separate. When
Mm,
realistically, when I see you beyond the baggage, the meat suit, the name, what you're sharing, I see the same thing that is in me and you. And as Ramdas used to say, be like, far out. How'd you get in that one? I'm in this one. I have this name, but like, what are you doing in there? Because at the end of the day, there's something that we all share that is incredibly much the same thing. And breath is the one thing that can connect that too. And that when people come together to share, that's why eventually it breaks the fourth wall. Eventually the illusion of separateness just goes away and we start to see ourselves in another person. That you are me just living a different life. Yes, your challenges have been different, but we're fundamentally of the same stuff, of the same four elements, the earth, the fire, the wind, the waters, that we're fundamentally all sharing in this experience. And that the more separation, which separation is a symptom of the disconnection that happens in ourselves, again, how can we be connected to other people if we are disconnected from ourselves? Another word for disconnection is separation. So this is why I like to be in those kinds of spaces where we see people share without the need to fix, without the need to give
mm,
advice, to just witness. And you'll see the nodding because you're like, yep, that's me too. And it's a big acknowledgement that we need to make that what we see even globally is us too. The worst of it, man, the best of it and the worst of it. The bombing of innocent people, whatever it is, like that's us too. We did that. Not you particularly as Ethan, not me particularly as Steve. We, as a human species, did that. Why? Because we bought into the illusion of separateness. And there are all these things that drive that separateness. Different borders on countries, religions, how we think the world is, whether we don't believe in a God or not. Like all of these things are just part of the illusion. And they fuel our own disconnection, our own separation. And then you scale that up to 7.5 billion people, and you get money involved, and you get policies involved, and you get, people that portray to hold the one true way and the truth. And that's when shit like this happens. So in a kind of dramatic way, healing happens in the presence of that compassionate witness is very true on a micro scale, that I think if we were all kind of taking more of that lens and seeking more of that out, that I don't know that we end up so far off the path. We end up so separate from one another that we think it's a good idea to take somebody's life because they're a bad person or a bad guy. That's a deep, deep systematic failure and a loss of connection.
yeah. Yeah. Getting into deep nihilism. This is interesting. I don't know why my brain went here, but I'm going to bring it up. There's this topic that Jordan Peterson talks about, and I think it also comes back to this connectedness that we're speaking of, and that you could look at someone in Russia right now and think like, oh, I would never be this person. I'm completely different, or someone that's bombing innocent schools or what have you. But Peterson had talked about this idea of um, judging a Nazi guard back in the Hitler days in Nazi Germany. But if you were there, what
Yeah.
makes you say you wouldn't be a guard?
Yeah.
when you really think about it, and we are all human beings and we're all the same. And um, it's just maybe a different life path that you're on right now. Like right now, I wouldn't go be a Nazi Germany guard because I know the end result. But a lot of times we don't really know the end result.
Yeah.
I have this little aphorism that I keep in my mind. And whenever I'm just walking around, I always remind myself that I see divinity in everyone and everything, and we are all connected. So this helps me in times when I want to judge. Unfortunately, I'm a human being. I tend to judge, and I'm walking down the street and someone's begging for money, but it's just
Mm.
like, you know what? I'm you and you're me.
Hmm.
So if I'm gonna think in my mind, oh, look at this scum of the earth here. But if I'm you and you're me, at least maybe not give something physical, but I can offer a positive thought vibration
Yeah.
to this person. That's the least I can do instead of judging and these things in this world that we're living in. I think I told you I'm doing a social media break right now
Hmm.
because we're being trained to judge things that just are constantly occurring, and that's a very unhuman thing. Maybe it's human, but it's to judge so frequently is, I believe, detrimental for our psyche.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're spot on, and I'm reminded by another Ram Dass quote, influenced a lot by Ram Dass, but he says he was
I love
always
it.
cheeky and playful. He said, "Treat everybody you meet as God in drag." That the
Got
prostitute, the
it.
homeless person, the person that doesn't share your philosophical or religious beliefs. Like, what if you treated everybody you met as God in drag? That they're just a unique manifestation of the divine. That God is this massively charged three-letter word. There's no other three-letter word that carries as much weight that God does. That God is essentially, this thing that has broken itself into 8 billion pieces in a quest to try and see if we can all find our way back home. And Ramdas says that's what we're doing. We're all just walking each other home. So
Hmm.
that when I see that homeless person, the judging mind wants to say, "Ooh, what a loser, probably addicted to drugs. I'm not going to give them anything because they're going to go spend it on meth. They made horrible decisions." That's what the judging mind does. But if you can recognize the divinity in that person, what fills that space is compassion. That,
Hmm.
yeah, logically they probably made some less than ideal decisions, but why? Because nobody chooses that, man. That person probably had it so bad we couldn't even comprehend, and that all they deserve to be witnessed in that moment is a human. So at least let's give them a name. Like if I'm not giving charity because there's a point where you have to have boundaries, you can't just give and give and give, but you can, like you said, give your energy, give your attention, look somebody in the eye, ask them their name, and give
Hmm.
them the time of day. It's probably worth more than money anyway, because everybody walks past them stuck in the judging mind and has thrown them out on the side of the road like a piece of trash.
Yeah. Throw a
And
$5 bill at them like a piece of trash too.
yeah, right, right. And to, we talked about Jung earlier, and Jung talked a lot about this. He basically said, what you judge in another person is an unhealed part of yourself that you don't like to witness. And it serves as a really potent reminder that the only thing you can do is polish your mirror. Is what you're judging judges you right back. You're just
Hmm.
seeing a different, more extreme manifestation of that in that particular moment. That what you're judging that person for making all of these bad decisions because you really don't like that aspect in you. That if you play that out to its extreme, that if you make bad decisions, you end up there one day too. To talk of like the Nazi soldiers, you hit the nail on the head, because we judge everything from our lens of presentism. So we apply our current knowledge and knowing to past events and say, well, I obviously would never have done that. But many millions of people didn't they?
Yeah.
And the reason being is you don't have to agree with what people do, but you have to fundamentally see that every person is just acting in ways to get their needs met. And there has to be some semblance of compassion for that, because they are trying to get their needs met just like you are and just like every other person is. So that person that we judge from a far enough distance out, if you got up close to them and actually figured out what their needs were that they were trying to get met, it's for security, it's for safety, it's for fear of their own life. And you get a little bit closer to like, wow, am I so ignorant to think that I would be spiritually immune to all of that? to be able to stand steadfast when the whole country is doing it, and you've been also manipulated by an evil genius propaganda machine, that you would be the one that could avoid all of those tripwires and wouldn't do it? Or would you probably also get swept up in the hysteria? And that's fundamentally what humans are doing. We're always trying to get our needs met, and that's why they say it's hard to hate up close. You can take your most vehement enemy that you disagree with so much, but if you actually just sat down with them and shared a coffee or something like that, you'd probably find that there is a lot more similarity than you'd like to admit, and that
Mm,
you might even see in them what is in you, and you realize that they're just on a different path. They were born in a different place with different challenges, and you can actually surrender a little bit of your own self-righteousness that, well, I have it right, obviously, because why would I be wrong? So they have it
yeah.
wrong. And you can maybe see that, oh, people see things differently depending on what they've been through. And that again, I
Mm,
might not agree with what they do or what they even believe, but I agree with the fundamental right to try and protect their own needs. We have to agree
mm.
with that much.
Reminds me of, I thought of this funny story. I don't know if I've heard of this before somewhere else, but if you see a psychopath and they're walking down the road, it's not like they're thinking, I'm a psychopath.
Mm.
This is what I'm doing. It's just like this is what led to their life path and where they are now and the way that they're thinking, which is interesting. I wanted to, if we could, I wanted to pivot back a little bit. We had mentioned dream analysis with Carl Jung, and this is something that I've have really dabbled in over the years, and I want to ask your thoughts on something. Recently, I'd say over the past 2 months, I started using AI to help me with dream analysis, and I have this like funny dance with AI where I don't want to be getting so much counsel from AI where I'm neglecting my own mental faculty, but I want to help it. I want it to utilize it to help me better understand things. So. Have you ever done dream analysis, and what are kind of your thoughts on me programming AI to help me understand my dreams?
Yeah, I think AI is an interesting one because essentially it's just another manifestation of consciousness. Like we created that. It seems to be what humans do, is create things. And it seems that if God is anything, what God is organizing for is increasing complexity. And the reason I say that is historically that's all we've ever done, is get more and more complex. And that complexity forces novel insights, and that AI might be the prime example of the most complex thing that we've created so far. That's not us, by the way, because if you look at nature and you look at evolution, clearly the highest order of complexity is in the human. I mean, there's nothing else like us. We are so
Mhm.
incredibly complex. The way we can think, the way we are, the way we evolve, the way we created this, to the point where we got so creative that now we start to create things. And we're getting increasingly more complex as a species. You see this in all kinds of belief systems and gender identities. Like it's increasing complexity over and over again. And then we're creating more things that are increasingly complex. 15 years ago, an iPhone did not do what it does today. And 15 years from now, the iPhone is probably going to live inside of our heads. And we're just going to keep complexifying ourselves until we can't no more, or there's some kind of natural disaster or whatever it is. So I'm not one of these don't use the things of the world that we create. I'm one of these, you can use it as a tool, but if it uses you, you become the tool. And I think it's a delicate game with AI, but I think there's a way in which we can train it to be a decent amalgamation of understanding who we are. So with ChatGPT, for example, you can create a custom GPT where you basically tell it your life story and you tell it all the things you've been through and you update it with what you're working on. And it gives you, because by definition, if you just ask generic ChatGPT, what does this mean? It has to give you the average answer because it's built on inputs of all of people's inputs. It's a language learning model. But if you train it to look at it through, say I'm this and this is what I've been through, and I have an interest in this Jungian lens or this depth psychology lens, and I'll take all of that into account, and create the Ethan custom GPT, then it serves as a really interesting mirror actually to work from, a place that is easy to access, easy to talk to in the sense that you can just voice note it out, and it's going to give you some pretty poignant reflections actually. And I think it can be quite profound in that sense. I would take what it gives you with a grain of salt, as more of a intuitive nudge as to the accuracy of what it says. Like you said, not to make it your therapist that like everything it says is true, to either say, that doesn't really resonate, so I can leave it, or wow, that's really interesting, and something inside of me feels like that's a thread worthy of pulling on. So let's
Mm.
pursue that. Because that's really all a good coach would do for you. That's all a good therapist would actually do for you. A good coach or therapist doesn't say, "Oh, Ethan, this is what your dream meant." Yeah, this is what your dream meant. This is your teeth falling out because you're worried about money. Oh, okay, thank you. They would ask you curious questions about certain themes to see if you can arrive at something that feels more like your own conclusion.
Mm.
And I think ChatGPT can be used in that way. So I think it's very interesting to think about your dreams as early as you can when those so like this is the beauty of making something very easy to access is as soon as you wake up in the morning, if you're just coming fresh out of a dream, of course, we got to get the sunlight and all of that stuff, but your phone is one click away from getting into ChatGPT and just voice noting out unfiltered and undisturbed. So you can even just send that and then come and look at it later while you're still
Yeah.
in that theta alpha brainwave state. Because the other version is, yeah, pull out a pen and paper and journal, and that's great too. But tools we can use that can add really interesting insight. So I'm certainly not against it at all. I mean, it's been pretty profoundly impactful for me over the last year in particular as I've learned to develop a more healthy relationship with it, because I was kind of anti it at first because it just feels weird and it feels
Me
like,
too. Me
yeah, it
too.
just feels strange, man. But now I'm like, well, it ain't going anywhere, and it could be a tool, and it's making things simpler whilst complexifying the world, which is an interesting dance in and of itself. So I say full send.
Yeah. I like how you said utilize it, but don't have it utilize you. And I think a lot of these new social platforms, I say new, but in the last decade that have really made the surface, I think that's just a really good point to keep in mind is utilize it, but don't have it utilize you. Produce, don't be
Yeah.
the consumed.
Well, my worry for, ChatGPT is that, and I think we're even seeing this, there's early signals in the noise of data that more people use it to kind of think for them, the less they're going to experience digital dementia earlier and earlier. They're going to lose the ability to think for themselves. They're going to have, just the tiniest thread of something that they want to say, and then they're going to ask ChatGPT to create whatever that is. Even you can read the chat GPT responses on comments and posts, for example, because it does this certain thing with juxtapositions and the M dashes. And you're like, a lot of people are communicating now because they know what they want to say. They don't know how to say it. So they say, chat GPT, help me do this. And then they do it. But that's a very slippery slope because you do that a few thousand times and you're never going to have an original thought again. You're just going to start asking ChatGPT to do it for you. So yes, use it as a tool for certain things, and just like you said, be wary of it because if there's anything we don't need in our lives, probably it's more technology. And this thing is really good and really alluring and really clever, and it'll be easy to get suckered into it.
I have a pretty interesting personal experience with that. I call it 3 months ago, I was more getting into ChatGPT and I run these calls on Sunday. It's for DreamState, my company, and it's just a mastermind. About 15, 20 of us hop on a call and I lead it usually. Sometimes I have other people lead it. And I was starting to like utilize ChatGPT to help me come up with prompts and plans. And I was like, hey, ChatGPT, give me a topic tonight around Fyodor Dostoevsky and his
Mm,
model of the world, and give me some points about his life so I can share it with the group and that we can pull from this.
mm,
And it would give me this amazing plan. And I'm sitting here just reading off of this and giving little things. And I did it twice. I'm like, what are you doing, man? This is taking away from like the authenticity, the reason why people are here in the first place.
right,
And
right.
I'm very grateful I caught myself for that. But I do believe that it can be dangerous because it was easier. It
That's
was a
right.
lot easier for
That's
me to
right.
just read off this list about Dostoevsky, and I sound really smart because I'm reading this crazy stuff that ChatGPT knows about this guy. So
It's
yeah, it was interesting.
it feels to me like the difference between knowledge and wisdom. You know, like
Mm,
the knowledge is more about filling the brain with stuff and using tools to fill the brain with stuff. And wisdom is very experiential. It's earned. Like there's no wisdom doesn't come easy. Knowledge can come easy now because we've got more access to information than we've ever had. Wisdom is knowledge that's been authenticated through lived experience. So even if the words that you say are the same, there's something like a resonance to when somebody says something that you know is coming from a wise, integrated, and earned place, where as opposed to somebody that's just reading off a script. And that's the one thing that ChatGPT I don't think will ever be able to replace, because as much as it can sound smart and sound wise, if a person is just regurgitating it, they lack whatever strange little thing happens there, whether it's in the energy with which it's conveyed or the conviction or the integrity that doesn't allow it to actually land as earned wisdom. And really, I don't think we're looking for as a culture is more knowledge. I think we're looking desperately for more wisdom, because it seems like we've played the knowledge game for quite some time now. And this is, it's just like mentally masturbating ourselves to death, because it kind of feels like the same thing, but it's not. So we're intellectually obese and we're starved at a soul level. And the soul gets fueled by wisdom. The soul gets fueled by experience, because experience is our greatest teacher. And if we all just sit inside now and learn from the greatest minds ever, because we can say, hey, teach me, blah, 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 then we don't actually earn that. And as we know in all other areas of life, if it's not earned, it's not real in a sense. We're kind of borrowing that. It's cheap. And I'm glad you caught that too, because that is the exact kind of slippery slope that I said, where you could have just ran into the wind. And here's the thing, you could have even been successful doing that. But
yeah,
there's that
that's
dichotomy
what's
I spoke
dangerous.
about
Yeah.
much, much earlier in the call. Success is getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you get. So you could grow a huge coaching community with like all of this, like, wow, look at this success. But you might not have been happy with what it is, because you're going to feel something like this is icky, or I feel like a
Mm.
fraud, or I feel like I'm just stealing these things instead of living these things. And maybe, maybe the real version of this, the wise version of this, doesn't sound as well put together. It doesn't sound as smart, but it will land so much richer and truer than, just being the smartest guy in the coffee shop.
Mm. It allows for that freedom to, while speaking, uncover and solve the problem in real time. And I think that's
Right.
really beautiful when you listen to someone speaking or coaching and they're actively trying to solve a problem in real time by asking questions and speaking out loud. I love that. Steve, I want to pivot a little bit and talk about I want to share an experience with you I had like 4 months ago. I know you're a savage in the CrossFit gym.
Hmm.
I've been doing CrossFit for about 2.5 years. I absolutely love it. I played sports my whole life, and it was just one of those things that was able to give me that competitive edge again and
Hmm.
have something new to work on a daily basis. And I was post knee surgery when I get into it, and it was just perfect timing for me. But I was at this mastermind in Miami like 6 months ago, and there was this big beefcake. Looked like he might have taken some steroids because his face was like all pimply. He was just overly jacked. But I was curious. I just went up to him. I was like, "Hey, brother, like you're a big dude. Like, what do you do in the gym?" And he went through this like crazy boring routine
Yeah.
of like the classic, legs on Tuesday, chest on Wednesday. And he said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I do CrossFit and I like to run." And he's like, "Oh, those are the two worst things you can do." And it was very funny to me in that moment because initially I got a little bit offended. I'm like, "You don't fucking know me. Like, what do you mean?"
Yeah.
And then I really thought about it. I was like, this guy is just sharing his only worldview about what works for him. And he doesn't understand the reasons why I'm doing CrossFit. And when I think about CrossFit, it's helps me deal with a lot of what we've talked about today. Because if I am going for a new PR in Fran, for example, I am going to suffer for 8 minutes and not think about anything
Yeah.
in that moment. And fighting that dragon, that which is Fran, when I'm done with that, I mean, give me a problem. Steve, give me a problem after that. Give me a call with a problem. No problem. Let's handle this effectively. So if you could talk about a little bit about your journey with CrossFit, what you like about it, how it helps you in your life, and
Yeah.
We'll kind of bounce off that.
Yeah, I'll start kind of esoteric and then just ground it in reality. That I think that as I've alluded to, I don't think that we are our bodies. That there's something like a soul that's everlasting that will transmute, transform in whichever way it goes, but that we are inside of these bodies. And so we're a vehicle and a passenger kind of dynamic here. And therefore, the health of the vehicle that you're in allows you to have more experiences, which I just said is your greatest teacher. So it makes a lot of sense to me to see that spiritual evolution is also physical evolution to a point. Now we can get too trapped in the material and get all about vanity metrics, etc. But a healthy body undoubtedly clears energy, allows you to experience more for a healthier, holistic view of life itself. So I've always, well, not always, but since I found some semblance of athletics in my teenage years, always made that connection. Exactly like you said, that the problems in life seem much smaller when you've gone through some chosen adversity. So when you choose your adversity, when the unchosen adversity in life finds you, it's kind of like, well, this is what I've been training for in a way. It allows me to say much more even keel. It's a testament that I microdose every single day, that I know that I can do hard things. Therefore, if this is a hard thing, I've got a lot of proof and I've got a lot of evidence, and confidence is evidence based. So I've got a lot of confidence that I can handle what life throws my way because I practice facing small amounts of adversity every single day. So, I'd done rugby as a teenager into an early career in mixed martial arts that I wanted to pursue professionally, and had several fights and was, on the cusp of deciding whether I wanted to do that. As a pivotal moment when I met my wife and it started the backpacking phase. So that dream kind of died, which is good because I would never have been the best in the world. And what I was told very early on is if you're not going to be, the world champ in this, you're going to end up broke and brain dead. So at least now we're not brain dead, and we're not fully broke anyway. So we're doing okay in that sense. But it left me constantly in love with the martial arts, and I did jujitsu for a long time. And then I moved to rural Tennessee 3 years ago. And I just so happened to get a text from a friend who was deeply in the CrossFit space who said, I hope you realize you've landed like 20 minutes from the mecca of CrossFit. And it's known as CrossFit Mayhem. It's the birthplace of Rich Froning Jr. That's the GOAT of CrossFit. For anybody that's into the sport, they know the name Rich Froning. And his gym is 22 minutes from my house. So it was natural to be like, well, I guess I got to try this CrossFit thing. And what I really enjoy about it is it humbled me more than anything else, especially when I first started, because all of the skills, apart from being, generally decent level of athleticism and aerobic fitness, all of the skills were brand new. Learning to do double unders, learning to do Olympic lifts, learning the high skill gymnastics. It was just like being a complete beginner again, getting your ass whooped by 42-year-old mom of four Sarah who's just kicking your butt on all of these wads, and you're like, holy moly, okay, I thought I was fit, but there's levels to the game. And since then, I've been doing it now for probably almost 3 years. And I love the challenge. I love the element that it's allowed me to clear up so much mental space in terms of what am I doing for training, because I can just turn up,
Yeah.
look at the programming, know that I don't get to cherry pick what I'm good at. So it doesn't create bigger gap between strengths and weaknesses. The programming's the programming. I'm going to do it. Some days are going to be in my favor, like this morning, and some days are going to be not in my favor, and I'm going to get my butt absolutely kicked. And they're probably more valuable because I get to grow through them. I train very early in the morning with a group of guys that I love, because that competition is very important for men. I truly believe that
Yeah.
healthy competition, where like once the timer goes, just like back in the jiu-jitsu days, we're going to try and strangle each other, twist each other's joints and get a tap. And then as soon as it's over, we're going to hug it out and high five, and they become some of your best friends, because men in particular bond through adversity, and CrossFit
Mhm.
like allows you to experience that. And I will say it's really bloody effective too. 36 and in really, really good shape, arguably the best shape that I've ever been in, despite, being of the most advanced age and busier and as a dad and all of those things. So it's really effective. So I enjoy a lot about CrossFit. I enjoy the CrossFit community. I enjoy having that competitive element. And yeah, I like the novelty of it. I like not going like the big bro you saw in the gym that's probably doing a bro split and has been doing the same thing for 10 years to just get massive. Every day is different. Every day is uniquely challenging. And I like that. So CrossFit is really working for me right now. And I've not fell out of love with it in any way, shape, or form over the 3 years of doing it. And I'm just excited because it's cool to still feel relatively new at it in the grand scheme of things compared to my
Yeah.
athletic career. but still making strides and gains. And I think fundamentally that's very important. I think whenever I talk to people that aren't feeling good about themselves, it's because they're not making progress. And CrossFit's allowing me to feel like I'm making progress day after day. So it takes care of the physical bucket of my journey quite well, which I really enjoy.
Yeah. I like how you were talking about the community. For my experience this year, CrossFit has been like the one thing that's helped me find community.
Hmm.
And language doesn't matter within CrossFit. Like suffering is suffering. You don't need to speak Spanish or English.
Yeah.
And although it has helped me learn Spanish very well being in these gyms, but it's been so beautiful. I've met some of my best friends here now that
Yeah.
we can't really speak that well together, but we forged this relationship through suffering. And it's just like, I see you. I see you because I've seen your heart at 12 minutes into something really, really
Yes.
difficult.
Hmm.
And I saw you push through that. And that's a spirit, that's a warrior spirit that I want to have in my corner if we leave this gym and something crazy happens on the street. I want you in my corner. And I find that with people in CrossFit.
Yeah.
And it fires me up. Maybe it's the inner masculinity, just being in a CrossFit gym and also always losing workouts too.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it pisses me off. I get pissed off. I want to win every freaking workout. And I understand sometimes like, oh man, this one's just not for me. There's
Yeah.
this one dude here, his name's Juan Pablo. Juan Pa is a savage, and he does not look like a savage. He's kind of skinny, but
Yeah.
he is a savage. Now, we're always going back and forth, just like messing with each other. But yeah, it's just some good just great energy.
Yeah. Well, I said I had a little post on Threads this morning that said the universal currency of respect is effort.
Mm,
That's really all you need, regardless of skill level or who can do the ring muscle ups versus who can, or whatever else it is. Like everybody respects effort, and everybody's effort is of a different level depending on where they're at, the body shape, size, weight, history of training. But you know if somebody's giving 100% or not, wherever they're at. And if you see somebody that's giving 100% and they're showing up, they earn that respect, and it transcends boundaries of language or whatever, because real recognize real in that respect. And it's perhaps the most important thing to develop as a skill, because if you can have the ability to just push and work really hard, name me something that won't help in life. Name me an endeavor where the energy of being willing to do a little bit more, go a little bit deeper, push when you feel like quitting isn't helpful. And that's why, again, I'm so bullish on a physical practice as part of a human's development, because it's just so much more than looking good and being confident and having muscles or being lean. It's fundamentally like training the entire system and the being, and it serves your spiritual endeavors, it serves your business endeavors, and it's perhaps, as much as people might not like the fact, but it is true that it's perhaps the single easiest way to demand more respect from the world, because people will treat you differently when you're in great shape than if you're not. And they just will, and that's because it's not got anything to do with how you look. It's got everything to do with survival signals evolutionarily, that if somebody's in good shape, it tells you a lot about who they are. It tells you a lot about their
mm,
character. It tells you that they're dependable, that they're consistent, that they honor their routines, that they probably don't drink every night of the week, that they, care about things and they hold themselves to a high standard. And that's why it's sexy, and that's why it's admirable. And that's why if you don't feel like you're getting what you want from life, you might also want to reflect all this internal stuff we're talking about, yeah, but also on the physical. Like, you'd be amazed at the doors that will be open to you by getting in better shape, because people will fundamentally see you differently if you hold yourself in that regard.
this when you know yourself too, that you're not going all in on your workout and you kind of half-assed it. Like that's that because you could see someone else like, oh, he's going hard, but you yourself know it's like I left something on the table today.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's not a good feeling. And it kind of reminds you, it's almost like the analogy of sleeping in. It's like you sleep in one day, you're like, okay, I don't like how I felt. So tomorrow I'm going to get back to routine.
Yeah.
And I kind of use that for CrossFit as well. It's like, ah, yesterday I kind of half-assed it. I don't know, excuses. I'm going to go really hard today. And in that moment when you're 10, 12 minutes in, you're like, oh, I kind of want to half-ass it again. This is really hard. These burpees suck. But
Yeah.
you're like, what did I do yesterday? I half-assed it. So I gotta go hard. I gotta finish this out strong.
Yeah.
And that translates to other areas of our life, I found, which has been really beautiful for me in my CrossFit journey, where it's like, say I'm in a business and I'm 6 hours into the day and I want to quit, but who am I?
Hmm.
Am I the type of guy that quits? Well, this morning I did, and I absolutely obliterated that workout. So let me continue with that. Let me continue with that energy right now. And I've just realized how it translates. And you had brought something up really well for someone who maybe doesn't feel like they have purpose. Just start there.
Yeah.
Start with the body. Start in the gym. Do something really difficult, and then stuff will start stacking on top of that.
Yeah. And I've said that to many, like I'll get messages a lot from younger gentlemen that are kind of like fresh out of college, early 20s, looking for a little bit of direction in life. And it's probably the lowest hanging fruit with the biggest return on their investment. I'll quite simply say, spend the next year and get in the best shape of your life. Get in the best shape of you can even imagine. Because you're going to learn so much more through that process than how shreddy Kruger you look at the end of the year. Because it's going to cultivate something in you that is going to translate to every other area of your life. And by the way, once you've done it for a certain amount of time, it's not that health and fitness doesn't excite me anymore, but it's kind of the surface level. It's kind of that like it's the door in to much deeper work. But it's hard to bypass it if you're not treating yourself well physically, if you're not feeding yourself healthy food, if you're not watching your consumption. Because when we talk about diet, people only think about food, but I'm talking about social media, the reason you're taking a break right now, like your holistic consumption. And that can all be touched and moved through when you're on a physical health journey, which allows you ultimately to get to the deeper layer of the other stuff we've talked about today, like beliefs and what shapes you and who you want to be. And now you're healthier and more confident to do it because you've got that belief that, well, I made myself in great shape and I've done that for a year and I show up every day when I don't want to. Now everything else is possible because of what I mirrored in my physical body.
I had this little quote I created and stumbled upon a while ago, and it's seek a dungeon, leave a dungeon. So if you're ever in a life dungeon, going through a breakup, just lost your job, you're a little bit confused, voluntary suffering. So go. I like to do long runs,
Hmm.
like 3, 4 hour runs when
Hmm.
I'm in a dungeon, and in that moment, it's like no headphones, and I'm solving the problems and I'm putting myself in a dungeon, something that's difficult, and it puts perspective on, I guess, what a bad day is or what you're actually suffering for. But I feel like what a lot of us do is we'll try and get cheap dopamine or something when we're in that dungeon. So, do you utilize a frame of that as well in your life?
Well, actually, what you just described is really interesting because it's kind of old accidental find through cognitive behavioral therapy where they realize that people that have a fear or a resistance to dealing with something, like working through it fully, that it becomes significantly easier when they are moving forward through space. So it's really interesting that you said a long run when you're processing something because there is something psychologically that is informing the nervous system and everything that you're dealing with. If I am moving forward through space, it doesn't have to be a run, it can just be a walk. That what I'm doing is I'm approaching as opposed to running away from. And it is a signal to then figure out the solutions, to look it dead in the eye, to you're going to the cave you fear to enter with your sword drawn, saying, like, I'm going to slay this bitch and I'm going to go in there. Because the other thing that you said, this cheap dopamine, this hide away, this drink it away, this scroll it away, that is not approaching, that is avoiding. And you're
Mm.
either approaching in life or you're avoiding in life. So a little call out to the listener, and it's cool that you've, accidentally found yourself doing this when you need to either process or work through something. Get on the front foot. Like just go take a walk. That thing that really scares you, if you have to have a difficult conversation soon with your spouse or a person at work, or you're going to ask for a raise or something, and it feels like, oh, I can't think about that, so I distract. Go think about it while walking with no distractions. And in an ideal world, like do these things whilst walking if you can. You know, if there's a conversation you can have over the phone, take it whilst walking, because that energy of like, I'm not running away anymore. I'm running towards. Now I'm in control. So that's really cool. Yeah, I love that frame, dude. I think I use a very, very similar energy in that way. I know there's nothing that's not made better by a walk. So I do two things, you know, when I'm really stuck on something that's supplementary to all the things that I do anyway, is I either take it outside and go for a long walk that usually will find me. I'm blessed to live on 15 acres of land, so I can just wander around the woods and sit by a creek and, you know, kind of open myself up to being held by nature. We call it Mother
Mm.
Nature for a reason. You know, it's that true embodiment of unconditional love. And I will talk to nature. You know, I have no qualms in saying that I will have a conversation with the rivers and the trees, and I'll say it because I know the compassionate witness is the mother, the unconditional love
Mm.
of the mother, and it's very, very healing. So I'll walk, I'll, you know, think about things, I'll conversate with nature, I'll conversate with myself in nature. Or sometimes I realize that I'm dealing with something and I lay down on the floor right where I am, and you know, not in a coffee shop or anything, but when I'm in a safe space at home, and I tell myself I'm not getting up until I can resolve this. And
Wow.
sometimes that just takes 5 minutes and some deep breaths. And sometimes that means laying on the floor for an hour and canceling a call that's on the calendar because I can't resolve this right now. I'm too stuck in resistance. I'm too lost in the sauce, so to speak. It's usually sooner rather than later because it's just usually coming to presence with what is, and lying down on the floor and taking a few deep breaths and getting out of the head and sinking into the body and the heart. And there it is, like, boom, there's your answer. You knew it all along. You just didn't carve out the time to feel it. So those are two things that I lean into a lot when I'm, you know, at a proverbial fork in the road.
It takes a high level of maturity to sit down on the ground and just deal with it.
Hmm.
And sometimes that means having to cancel a call, but that's that respect that you have for yourself
Right,
that you're
right,
able to do that.
right.
That's really beautiful.
Well, there was the saying that, you know, you can't serve from an empty cup. And it's cliche, but it's so true that what you want to be doing is filling your cup up first and then allowing others to sip from the overflow, everything that's spilling out from abundance onto the saucer. You know, that's a great place, but too many people are trying to give from empty and they martyr
Mm.
themselves to that. And you can't, this is why people get all weird about this, because they feel like it's selfish to really take the time for themselves. But I would push back and say it's almost the most selfless thing you can do, because, okay, yeah, you need to buy some time back. But when you come back to those people that you say you value, whether it's your children, your spouse, or the people you work for, or your clients that you coach, they're now getting the fullest, most embodied, integrated, honest version of you. And that's not a disservice. That's you treating them with the level of respect by not giving them a 20% version of you, you know? So we need to come up with something that's a better frame of this. Maybe it's, I don't know, like holistic selfishness or something, because people have so much guilt about taking the time that they need for themselves. And because there's always, we have this weird productivity purgatory debt thing where when we're just sitting down and being still, we have this ambient sense of anxiety that I should be doing something. I could be working on this thing in my business. I could be doing more marketing. Like, and it just never fucks off. But
Yeah.
we can't create from that energy of like feeling like we need to. So I think it was Alan Watts that said, if you force a solution on a problem, you just create new problems. And I think about it all the time, because you can force a solution on a problem and you can solve the problem. But because it was done from the energy of forcing, you just create a new problem in its wake. And the issue is not with what you do, it's the energy of forcing. So if you are desperately lonely, you can force a solution on that problem by getting on the apps and having a casual Tinder hookup and temporarily assuage that feeling. But you'll just
Yeah.
create a new problem in its wake, where either that person wasn't aligned for you, or you feel crappy about yourself, or you end up in a relationship with this person because you're operating out of fear. And it's not a fuck yeah, it's a hell no. If
Mm.
you feel like you're completely broke, you can solve that issue by working an extra 20 hours a week in Uber delivery driving or whatever it is. But you forced it. So the problem that you create on the other side of it is now you've got zero work-life balance and you burn out and you're sick all the time. So you've got to be very, very careful. Like, we've all got problems that we want to solve, so to speak, but we've got to be very careful with the energy with which we do it. And it's the forcing that gets us in trouble.
Mm. This is connected to this, but also moving on the lines of moving out of our hometown. And I had a conversation recently with my brother. I was home in Rhode Island, where I'm from, for a funeral. And my brother, we're just having a nice time together. And he's like, why don't you come home? Your mom and dad are getting older. Your whole life is here. Your family's here. And it was very easy for me to answer that question because I've been home before and I've had a dream, a goal of living in South America and learning Spanish for a really long time. And to me, that's kind of like a hero's journey in itself, and
Hmm.
I'm following the path. And when I was living back home, yes, I was there physically, but I was so mentally somewhere else because I felt like I wasn't following my life path and my purpose being home. And I felt empty. So, yes, I'm sitting here having dinner with you guys,
Hmm.
but I'm not truly there.
Yeah.
And what I told him is when I go home now, I am so present with you guys that this 2 weeks that I'm here in November feels like a whole year
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
am here with you. So to me, it's worth it to live my life and only have these 2 weeks with you guys. But in those 2 weeks, it's worth a year. It's
Yeah.
worth that whole year for me. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that because I know you moved away a really long time ago and you must still have family back
Yeah.
in your home country. So
Yeah. I think there's a very old saying that absence makes the heart grow fonder. And that's the element of what it is. I say it's one of my good rules for a relationship is actually you have to carve out time where you miss your partner. You have to miss your partner. So you have to either encourage them or you to take little retreats or something, go and take their own week away. Or, for many people, maybe it's built into their work schedule that they might be away every once in a while, but it's really healthy to miss them because in the absence of them, you realize what it is that you take for granted when you're around them 24/7. The weird little quirks that if you're on top of each other, breathing down each other's necks 365 days a year, that usually trigger you a week away is like, I really miss when she does that annoying thing, And it's the same thing with the people that we love. There's Ram Dass again. He said, if you think you're doing good on your spiritual journey, go spend a week with your family. And he said, because they know how to push your buttons better than anybody else because they installed your buttons. And when you're around that, it's constantly button mashing each other's things because as much as we're our own people and we're on our own journeys and we're learning about ourselves, you can't deny the roles that exist within family structure. It's always going to be brother, sister, older brother, younger brother, mom, dad, grandma, uncle. And there are all of these weird patterns that are really hard to break, especially when you're so in the soup of it all when you can get some distance and you can just see it for what it is and you can go back in from this like loving awareness. I'm really grateful. I genuinely missed you guys. That presence that you bring to the table now makes the ordinary moments really special, and it makes the special moments like a burned in core memory that will last you a lifetime. And all the other stuff that usually would trigger you because you're so consumed by it is just funny like stuff to giggle through. Oh, there's my mom being my mom, and oh, there's that little role, and oh, there's my dad again. It all just becomes grist for the mill of like training your awareness, and it's really beautiful in that sense. So it's not that everybody needs to leave home and all of that stuff, but there's something that is really healthy about distance too, that really unlocks something that you just can't see it if you're in it. It's if you're in it, you can't see it. You need to shake up the snow globe and allow it to settle to go back and say like, this is what I see now that I couldn't see otherwise. And the other
mm,
layer of that, which you will well know now, is just moving away or living in a different country or taking that adventure is an incredible way to accelerate your growth. It forces you to grow, unlike anything that you can usually experience if you stay in the same safe environment that you've always been. Not just because of the baggage that's surrounded and all of the stories and all of the stuff, but when you move away, you're completely unmoored. You don't know people. You've got to figure it out. You've got to reconnect. You've got to be social again. You can reinvent yourself. Nobody knows you as Ethan from school anymore. You're just like this random gringo in Colombia. So the world is your oyster. And that's why it's so powerful as well, from not just the family side and absence making the heart grow fonder, but so you can grow, so you can develop. Because it's kind of hard. And I think sometimes people just have to acknowledge that the environment that they're in might not be helpful to their growth. You might be like
Mm,
a lion that's dropped in the Antarctic. It's never going to thrive in that environment, you know? And you've got to, yes, you've got to bloom where you're planted. Yes, you've got to make the best of the situation, but you've also got to really acknowledge if this whole thing, including the people, are energy draining to me and not energy gaining to me, then I have to protect myself and get out until I can either come back in and be immune to those things because my boundaries and my self worth is so good, or just acknowledge that this isn't where I can thrive to the best of my ability. And I've got to find where that is because my only responsibility and the best thing that I can do for the people that I love is to work on myself. And the
mm.
ceiling is low here.
Reminds me of I have a friend, they'll say, I'm just not good at networking or social activities. Well, I'm like, well, you never do it.
Exactly.
And
Right.
if you move out of your hometown, I just went to a run club on Sunday, and I get I do this stuff daily, but I get the butterflies still.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, wow, new people. Okay, should I do this? Should I act like this? And I'm like, shut up, Ethan, just be yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just go have fun, and you end up having a great time. But it's like the butterflies always come up. You just get a little bit more familiar with the butterflies. You start able to name them, and you can utilize them and have fun with them and realize, oh, the butterflies are coming up. Last time I had butterflies, it led to a beautiful experience. So maybe today will
Exactly.
be a beautiful experience. And then you
Yeah.
do get better with your social anxiety and being able to communicate with people. And when an uncomfortable situation comes up, you're like, well, I've been here before.
Yep.
I was living in Los Angeles and I had negative $38 in my bank account, but I figured it out without mama
hmm
coming to help
hmm
me.
hmm Yeah, there's no growth in comfort and there's no comfort in growth. That's like the it's the same tricky thing to navigate for all of us. Like you can stay comfortable, you can never do those hard things, but you won't grow. Or you can decide that you want to grow and you've got to acknowledge that there is no growth without stepping outside of your comfort zone. So you've got to do the hard thing. Which one do you want? Again, I think most people want growth. It's fundamentally what we're here to do. They're just limited by fear or I'm not good at it. Of course you're not. You don't have any reps, but you can just microdose your way into all of these things because I think you're a happier, healthier person when you're willing to do it. And who knows? Like what I started with the conversation that my life is like a series of happy accidents by follow your bliss and, saying yes to the surrender of experiment of life, trusting life. That's that in a nutshell. That the trajectory of my life is so unbelievably and radically different than I ever could have imagined it, only because I was willing to do the thing that was slightly uncomfortable. Therefore, somebody that is listening right now might be on the precipice of something similar where you can't even comprehend what your life could look like in 5 years if you stop letting those little doubts of, well, I'm not good around people, or oh, I'm an introvert, or I just like it here, win. Like you
Mhm.
owe it to yourself to fuck around and find out.
I couldn't think of a better way to kind of wrap this up. You owe it to yourself to fuck around and find out. Steve, I really appreciate you being here today. It was just such an honor to have this conversation, hear your perspective, and I think life happens for us. And there's a lot of things that we talked about today that are really helping me right now. So from the bottom of my heart, I'm very grateful for you, and I'm very grateful for your openness and your ability to speak your lessons in your life and your wisdom for a big audience because this is a lot bigger than just you and I here today. And I'm sure we're both aware of that. So thank you. How can our listeners here connect with you and learn from you even more?
Yeah, and thank you. Thank you for having this space and some really fun questions and, the curiosity to learn. I hope we'll run it back again in the future and there'll be more challenges and more wisdom and more lived experience. So if people want to follow along in the meantime, you can hear me waffling on podcasts at Radical Health Radio. And my social media will take you everywhere you need to go. That's at the Stee Lane. Stee is just STE. It's just short for Stephen. That's what we do in England. So the Stee Lane, Lane, and that'll get you to the Instagram. And you'll see over there is a mix of banter and fun and life advice and fitness every now and then. Still trying to figure out exactly how to share my message, but the podcast and podcasting, especially guesting, because like I said, I don't get to do it much, is really where a lot of this stuff can come out. So it's so much fun for me as well, man. And Yeah, we're almost at 2 hours and it just kind of it went like that. So I appreciate you making it a good vibe and a fun conversation to have.
Absolutely. Well, we'll definitely connect soon, and I probably have about 38 other topics that I wanted to dive into with you.
There you go.
So we'll
That's
save
how
that
it
for another
goes,
one.
man. That's how it
All right.
goes. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.